Welcome to AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie, an AI literacy podcast focused on translating AI and robotic technologies from difficult to easy to understand. I'm your host, Anastassia. This podcast, my blog on the website aiedutainment.ai, my Substack and LinkedIn serve the same purpose, to get you bite-sized information on what AI is and isn't, what is hype and what is real, and what should we consider to develop safe and beneficial artificial intelligence. Today, I'm interviewing Dr. Craig Kaplan, the CEO and founder of IQ Company, focused specifically on AGI and artificial superintelligence. He is a visiting professor in computer science, and he has a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. In 1990, he published a paper, In Search of Insight, that he co-authored with Herbert Simon, a polymath and a Nobel Prize awardee. Craig focused on collective intelligence, safe superintelligence, and practical strategy for aligning advanced AI with human values and goals. Prior his current company, IQ Company, he has created and led multiple AI-related ventures. He worked in financial services as an example, and he built systems that outsmarted best performers on Wall Street. So today you will learn about what artificial general intelligence is, and you will hear about several AI scientists and practitioners who are worried about the current path humanity is taking to build AGI. And you will hear about AI history, so this dilemma and cross-pollination between symbolic AI and the approach to scale artificial neural networks. And if this is your first AI snack with me, boy, you are here for a treat. Let me open the studio to Craig. Craig, hi. It's such a thrill to have you in my studio. Thank you.
Anastassia, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
And let's start by discussing differences in defining artificial general intelligence, or AGI. What is your preferred definition, and what are companies like OpenAI doing to what I call align the definition to what they're building? And what are the most crucial elements for intelligence to become general?
Okay. You're correct that there are many definitions of artificial general intelligence. Sort of one of the original ones, and the one that I still like, is AGI is an artificial intelligence that can do any cognitive task about as well as the average human. And so the key concept it's in the name, general, the general part of AGI, is really that you have an AI that is not just an expert at, say, playing chess or driving a car in a very specific domain, but instead can do any cognitive domain, any intelligent activity that a human can do. And that's been very difficult to achieve because there's so many variables as you move outside of a very narrow domain.
This is so true. And when I teach AI to MBAs, I'm always comparing AI to a collection of points and clouds. And let's say if you are in a certain neighborhood, you are trying to see the pixels on the X-ray and define whether something is going on there, and it might be a tumor, then such a system, which is obviously a narrow system, might perform greatly and even outsmart tired human eyes. But if you ask the system to play chess or compose music, obviously that would be a doomed call. So obviously, we need something different from that. And you are founder of a company which is focused on building safe AGI systems. So what is your solution to deliver such systems?
So I think the amazing thing that has surprised many AI researchers, and I've been in this field since the 1980s, so I've had the sort of luxury and the fun, really, of watching the field sort of change from a time when almost nobody was interested in it, and then there was great excitement, and then an AI winter, and then a resurgence of interest. So usually there's some sort of catalyst. The latest resurgence of interest really came with ChatGPT in November 2022. But what was behind the scenes, that powered that was the tremendous success of machine learning algorithms. So in the early phases of AI, right from 1956 when the field was named, I'd say right up until the mid 1980s or early 1980s, that entire period, everything was symbolic, or almost everything was symbolic. There were some very strange researchers that everybody looked at as, oh, you're off in the area that's never going to lead to anything, that we're doing machine learning. But most of it, you programmed the rules into the systems. You knew exactly how they would work. And that approach was sort of doomed. It couldn't really scale. People tried for so many years to create essentially artificial general intelligence. They would do fine as long as the domain was very narrow, like chess, and you knew the rules, because that was manageable. But I remember there was one researcher, Doug Lynette at University of Austin, I think it was, who had an army of graduate students who was just programming in knowledge into the system, trying to get it to the level of a 5-year-old child, and just could never quite really get there. So what changed was machine learning, this idea that you don't have to program the rules in. Instead, let's just feed a whole bunch of data, like most of what people know on the internet. And if we get the algorithms right, the AI will automatically teach itself, right? So that's a very different approach. And that all of a sudden had the promise of scaling. And eventually that bore fruit. The early pioneers were there in the 80s doing it, but computers were not fast enough. It really took until sort of around the 2000s and then really 2010 where they really got fast enough. And you started seeing the success of these language models. So the conventional approach has been, okay, we can get AGI. Look how successful this has been. If we just build a bigger and bigger model with more and more data, eventually general intelligence will emerge. And I think that is debatable. A lot of people think it's debatable. Jan LeCun, who used to be chief scientist at Meta, has said this is never going to work. A lot of people sort of question that. But it could work. I just think that there's a better approach to get there, which is instead of building a giant model, let's have a community of models. And we can talk more about that, I guess.
So this is tremendously interesting. And Jan LeCun, he's talking sometimes about a comparison of current AIs to some animals. At some point in time, he said it doesn't even have the intelligence of a rat. And obviously, he was talking about the superior intelligence of cats vis-a-vis of AI. And, I was trying to decide for myself what are those current systems resemble. And I came with the conclusion it's a fish.
A fish. Okay, I like that.
And this is because, in so many books, it's written that current AIs are mimicking the neocortex. And for me, actually, the answer is no. They're mimicking the cortex, but not the neocortex. And current AI doesn't learn from counterfactuals. So those what-if scenarios, which are so common for humans, and this is why we have armies of therapists. So those scenarios are foreign to AIs. And without those scenarios, you can't even kind of, train your imaginarium. And this leads to the sad fact that causality is deprived from current AI systems. So it's about search, it's about retrieval, it's about, number crunching and statistical processing, but it's not about causal relationships. And if we don't have causality, how can we have reasoning and understanding? So I kind of, put myself on a fish mark, because rats, they learn from counterfactuals, not as fine as, let's say, chimpanzees or humans, but they can learn from it. Cats, they can. But obviously for fish, nope. And I'm wondering, so if this is in a kind of a network of several AIs and not a singleton, how do you embed causality into it? And is it important at all?
Yes. So great question. And I think well stated. I think what is missing, and so the field is realizing this, it's really great to watch, because it's sort of step by step, year by year, I see the entire field sort of inching closer in what I believe is the correct direction. And that is you cannot have simply a neural network that's been trained to memorize information. These systems, it's like if you were in school, there was maybe the kid who memorized everything but didn't really understand what was going on. And there was the other, student who sort of reasoned their way through things. And I think most of us would say, even though you can score well on a test, which many of these models do score extremely well on tests, if you're just memorizing and then sort of regurgitating what you memorized on the test, that's not sort of a deep level of understanding. On the other hand, if you can reason your way from first principles to an answer, that would be what we would consider sort of a deeper understanding of a field. Okay, so with that distinction, what we've had is basically tremendous success at the memorization part. And we've been missing the reasoning part. And I think the reason for that, it's sort of like I was a victim of its own success. People struggled for so long trying to build the, logical systems that actually were, some of them were quite good at reasoning, where you had to program in all the knowledge, but they just couldn't get it to generalize very far. And so when machine learning came around and there was this relatively easy way to just load up a whole bunch of knowledge and essentially get this memorized behavior, everyone was surprised at how well it seemed to do. And they sort of became infatuated and enamored with this and said, okay, this is the way. And everybody just said, if we want a smarter system, let's just give it more data and more computational power. Maybe we'll tweak the algorithms. We'll invent transformer algorithms. We'll improve the algorithms. But really what you're getting is just better and better memorization. And what's been missing is the reasoning component. Okay, here's the good news. That reasoning component was already invented by the pioneers of AI way back when. And I worked with two of them, so I know their work quite well. I'll mention them, but they are not certainly the only ones. So Herbert Simon and Alan Newell in 1972 wrote a book. This was before I even began my studies, right? I think I was, 12 years old or something. But they wrote a book called Human Problem Solving. It's a very thick book, about this thick and a little bit dense. But if you read that book and understand that book, they basically showed that all problem-solving activity, whether it's done by an AI or whether it's done by a human, can be represented basically as a series of states. I'm in this state. I'm here in California and I wish to go to Germany. How do I get there? Okay, well, this is my current state. That's the goal state. And then what action can I take? They called them operators that will take me from where I am to where I want to go. And you say, okay, I need to take a plane. Okay, so that's my next goal. Get on a plane. Oh, but here I am. How do I get to the airport? So that's a sub goal. So you could break problems down into a series of goals and sub goals, and you could figure out different actions you could take that would move you from one state to another. This is the fundamental paradigm for modeling any kind of reasoning or problem-solving activity. It's well established. It's been used in AI systems of the past, and it simply needs to be updated and combined with the new neural network models that have been so successful, the large language models. And then you can have hybrid systems. And those hybrid systems are, I think, the answer to your question of how we get causality and reasoning. What's been interesting is you're seeing that already the large language models, people have realized that you must do this, and they begin to do some level of reasoning. I don't think they've quite gotten to the universal cognitive architecture point where you'd be able to handle any problem. They're working on that. And I don't think it will be that long before people realize, oh, yes, actually, a lot of this work was done. We can update it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can combine the two approaches. So that's been really great for me to watch.
So interesting. Let me rephrase my question approaches differently.
Okay.
I think, and I totally respect that contemporary AI is fantastic in mimicking the mechanics of problem solving. And let's say, so you have those artificial neurons, they are in computers, they are in humans, they are in jellyfish. But what is kind of, missing is the biochemistry, let's say, of hormones, which is governing the mechanics of, let's say, biology. For example, Ivan Pavlov discovered that his dog salivated and other animals salivated if he kind of, produced a signal. It could be a bell, it could be something else. And then at some point in time, there was food. So he discovered that dopamine was not the pleasure hormone, but the hormone of anticipation. So there are other mechanisms which are kind of, governing how animals, how mammals, including humans, learn and anticipate. I am not seeing quite that such mechanisms were replicated with compute. I'm totally in respect that you can build ontologies, and this is what symbolists were trying to do with great, success or not so great success. I'm totally in respect that you can build different workflows, but I'm kind of questioning whether this is on par with biological intelligence, which is so depending on this ocean of hormones tweaking and steering the mechanics behind problem solving. So how do you think about it? And that leads us to a bunch of issues like catastrophic forgetting, which I don't know, is it solved? Probably not. the systems being frozen in space and not truly open, so that they don't really communicate with us. And. So how do you see this with this hybrid approach?
So I'm going to give you an answer, which is from a certain point of view. So I don't claim it's the only point of view or necessarily the right one. It's the one that I've been trained in and have operated in for probably 40 years. And that is the idea that intelligence is independent of how it's implemented. So you can have biological intelligence, you can have artificial intelligence. From my point of view and from this point of view that I'm going to express, it doesn't matter. Whether it's carbon-based or silicon-based, whether it has hormones and chemicals underneath that are, causing the memories to form and the forgetting to happen, or whether it's all done with circuits, doesn't matter from a certain perspective. And that perspective is the information processing perspective.
Max
If you look at, you just say everything is data coming in and inputs, and then there is some processing. It could be a black box. Maybe it's chemicals, maybe it's neural circuits or transistors, and then there's output. And as long as you can mimic or copy or implement the functionality of memory and the functionality of perception and the functionality of problem solving, whether it's done biologically or chemically, from an information processing standpoint, doesn't matter too much. So I don't know, that could be finessing the question, but in terms of being practical about it, it's pretty practical, because you then have a system, and that's why you can have a Turing test, right? You could have a human, a biological person with hormones and catastrophic forgetting and all the things that happen with humans, and you can have a machine. And if you can't tell which is which, then that means functionally, from an information processing point of view, they are more or less the same. So with that bias and that sort of framework, and this is how I've approached intelligent systems, I personally don't consider differences too much. I consider a whale intelligent, a dolphin intelligent, a human, a chimpanzee, but also very advanced forms of AI. All of them, in my mind, are intelligent entities, and all of them theoretically could be cooperating on a network if they had a common language or a common architecture.
This is tremendously interesting, and it reminds me of the Biennale of this year, which was the Biennale focused on architecture, not on arts. And they were talking about collective intelligence there. And they were discovering intelligence of stones and intelligence of plants, and how this intelligence kind of, communicated with the biology of animals and even humans and microbes. So this is tremendously interesting. And I agree that intelligence might be substrate independent. So whatever it is, if it problem solves and processes information, fantastic. My point is always that this biochemistry is a shortcut to kind of, deliver on a certain mechanism. Let me ask you, what is currently missing in AI to deliver GI, if anything at all?
Yeah, so there's two approaches, I think. There's probably more than two, but there are two approaches that I like to contrast for developing AGI. So the current dominant paradigm, because it's been so successful, people refer to these as scaling laws. And they're not really laws. It's kind of like Moore's law, where it just describes what's been happening. It doesn't sort of insist that this will happen in the future. And what has happened so far is, as you add more and more GPUs, more chips, more compute, and more data with the same algorithm, you get a large language model, for example, with more parameters. And if it has more parameters, it's going to behave more intelligently in general. And people have had tremendous success with this. Wow, we just build a bigger data center and we get even more data to feed it, and we get a smarter model. And so that has led to to me, it's sort of the easy thing to do. If you're a corporation and you have lots of money, then the easiest thing is not to try to figure out a different way to build AGI, but just throw more money in it, build more data centers, and you know that your next generation will be a little smarter than this one. And then, it's an arms race. Okay, so that's what's currently going on. And it is possible, Jan LeCun may not believe it, but there are certainly plenty of other scientists that debate him that do believe that if we just keep doing this, we will get AGI. So that I would characterize that as the dominant paradigm because it's been so successful. Then there's another school of thought, which is kind of a little bit on the fringes, but it happens to be the one that I've spent most of my career understanding. So I really believe it will work and is better. And that holds the promise for a faster path to AGI, a more powerful and intelligent path, and very importantly, a safer path. So that's why I like it. And that is the collective intelligence approach. So just as in human society, we say, many minds are better than one, or two heads are better than one. This is the fundamental idea of collective intelligence, that you don't have to have all of the intelligence within one brain. Instead, you could have it distributed across the community. I have spent many years building these systems. So I ran a company that built collective intelligence for financial markets on Wall Street, and we powered a hedge fund. It took a long time, but that beat the very smartest guys on Wall Street. I mean, with real money, billions of dollars of trades. So I know that it's not just theory. You can actually build these systems and they can beat the very smartest people, because Wall Street, for better or worse, with the lure of money, just attracts all these super smart people. So it was like, that was why we chose it, actually, was we wanted to find the toughest real world environment that was the most competitive we could think of, that had a very easy scorecard, like how much money you were making. And so collective intelligence won in that thing. You have to design the system appropriately. So I know an existence proof that it's possible to build real world systems. And this one had millions of individual participants every day. So it was scaled very widely. It's possible to build these systems at large scale and get super intelligent behavior in a very specific domain, in this case, trading stocks. Okay. I think the same thing can happen for AGI, but this time what you have to combine it with what we were talking about earlier, that general problem-solving architecture, or universal problem-solving architecture. Fortunately, we don't have to reinvent it. We can update things that others have done. And I think if you can imagine for a minute, I'll try to describe very briefly how this might work in a way that I think everyone can understand. We already know AI agents are taking off, and everybody wants a personalized AI agent. And I think that's a trend that will continue. These AI agents that are personalized will include not only our expertise. So I may have an AI agent that has Craig's background and expertise in every paper that he's ever written and every podcast he's ever done, and it's trained on his specific knowledge, but it will have my expertise, but hopefully, and I would say very essentially for humanity, it should have my values also. It should learn my ethics and what I consider right and what I should consider wrong. And the same for Anastassia. You should have your agent with your knowledge and your values. And if we replicate that across millions of humans, which is going to happen anyway, because everybody wants a little assistant, now that's great, because we have all these AI agents and they all have representative human values across the overall human population. It's not the values of 10 programmers in Silicon Valley or Mountain View somewhere that decided, here's a constitution that should be true for all 10 billion people on the planet. No, instead we have millions of AIs, each having a slightly different set of values. Okay, that's a good starting point. Now all we have to do is put them in a network where they can work together. We have to give them a common language so they can communicate in the same way, in a rigorous way. And I'm going to do a lot of hand waving. There's technical papers that I've written on how to do this, but let's assume that you could do that. And furthermore, just as in a human democracy, if I take an action, it's visible. You can see what I say. You can see what I do. That's transparency. One of the big safety problems with the dominant approach, where you build a giant large language model, is a black box. You don't know how it's going to behave. It's unpredictable. It hallucinates. It does all these things. If you have a network model where each time an agent takes an action, you can see the action, you can record that, you can audit it. If you have a very rigorous problem-solving structure that's showing why each action was taken, it becomes very clear what the system is doing. And even if it gets to a point where people can't keep up with that because it's moving so fast, you can have AIs that have good positive values because they have Anastassia's values that are checking that, right? You can have checks and balances. You can have transparency. You can have collective intelligence. All of that is possible. And that is a faster path because you don't have to wait to build the super intelligence. You can use the AI systems that we have today if you plug them together in an intelligent way. It's a more powerful path because many minds are always going to beat the one monolithic mind. Worst case, you can plug the monolithic mind into the network and then you have that plus the other ones, right? So it's always going to be smarter and it'll be more profitable. It'll be safer because of the transparency and the democratic way. And there'll be conflicts and you'll have to have voting and conflict resolution and all the messy things that we have in human democracies. You'll have to have some version of that on this network. It's not without messiness, but I think it will be way safer than a big black box. We don't know what it's going to do. It's way smarter than us. And we built it just because we didn't think of another way to do it.
It's so interesting what you are describing. I'm really trying to kind of, from one side, I'm a computational linguist by my first formation and psychologist by the second. I'm really trying to contemplate what is this kind of, similar with. Is it like the swarm of birds or, you know, is it like ant type behavior? If I just imagine those multiple agents, there isn't any central brain, but there might be some rules, because if we drive, we don't drive chaotically, so we kind of, uh, comply with a certain set of driving rules, right? So it's interesting. And is it not a completely assemble a utopia, like in the world literature in the 19th and in the 18th century? So those societies which were theoretically very positive, but practically they could not be achieved. And then I'm thinking about, so Simon, who we've been working with, and you co-authored even a paper with him. If I'm not mistaken, his Nobel Prize was for economics, wasn't it?
That's right.
No, no,
1978 in economics. Yep.
in economics. So he, and of course, there isn't an AI Nobel Prize. So yes, there are now two cases where Nobel Prize was awarded to AI scientists, but it was not for the discipline of AI. It was for chemistry and physics. So, but if I'm not mistaken, Simon was very strong at behavioral economics, right?
Yes.
And behavioral economics is a very important field because it's kind of, showcase that we might build theoretical model, but the real world does not really kind of, comply with this theoretical modeling. And so what do we do? And now if we have this collective of avatars, yeah, so what will this collective have as a purpose? Will it be the same as with humans, or are they going, let's say, to problem solve for fight cancer, mine asteroids, solve disease problems, solve the problem of declining demographics? So how do you envision the steering of the collective in such a network?
Wow. So many great things to talk about in what you just said. So let me start with Utopia because that sort of grabbed my attention. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that a collective network of millions of humans and AI agents working together creates utopia. I think we'll be lucky if it's just as messy as the democracy and the situation we have in the current world. And I want to I'll come back to hopefully some of the other points and remind me if I don't, but I want to do a little side tangent here. So because I want to talk about AI safety, I want to make sure we get that in and it's relevant here. So if you talk to people like Jeff Hinton, right? So Jeff Hinton, very famous for being one of the pioneers of the neural network algorithms. It was in the 80s, actually, that this stuff was developed and then worked for many years. And it sort of underlies all of the large language models and all the success that we've had. Jeff Hinton won a Nobel Prize, as you've said, in physics, also the Turing Award. Herbert Simon won the Turing Award. They're right there. They've done the same thing. So he has now quit Google and basically is on a road tour in his later years saying, look, we need to worry about the dangers of AI. And I've heard him speak, and the probability of extinction, human extinction by AI, this guy who sort of, everybody acknowledges as the smartest or one of the smartest guys living who knows about AI and built everything that everybody else is using, is basically saying, this isn't crazy. You really need to worry about this. There's a maybe 10 to 20% chance it kills us all, which people in the AI field refer to that as P-doom, the probability of doom. And it sounds so innocuous, but like when you think about that, wow, 20% chance that I die, my, partner, my family, everybody dies. That's crazy. So that can be paralyzing. So that doesn't have to happen. So let's contrast that high level of P-doom, 10 or 20%, which nobody really knows what it is, but that's just a guess. Some people think it's higher, some people a little bit lower. Let's contrast that with the number of people in human society that die from wars, Ukraine war, and armed conflicts every year. And that's on the order of magnitude of about 0.01%. So if you thought P-doom was 10%, it's 1,000 times less. Humans by themselves, without AI, we kind of kill each other 1/100th of 1% of the population every year. Any death is bad, but I would be really happy to trade 10% chance of everybody dying for 1/100th of 1% chance. And that's what humans do naturally based on their value system and just all the messy interactions that we have. So if we had AI or a community intelligence, a super intelligence, an AGI that sort of operated analogously to humans, and if it had the same values sort of proportionally to the humans, we might expect, although there's definitely some leaps of logic here, but we might expect that it would have a much lower probability of killing people because it would be operating kind of with the same value system. I think at the end of the day, you have two key things that matter. One is intelligence, which is getting higher and higher levels of intelligence from artificial intelligence, right? Humans are relatively fixed. We're not going to really evolve much in the next 50 years in terms of our IQ or ability to process information, but AI is going to go up thousands of times. And so it's very clear to me and to many other researchers, it's going to outstrip humans in intelligence, and we can talk about that more. And then the other thing is you have this intelligence is sort of power in this society, right? If you're smarter, I know from Wall Street, you can manipulate financial markets. Once you do that, you've got control of the capitalist system. You can pretty much do anything. So you're going to have tremendous power that's not human. And the whole key is going to be, is it on our side? What are its values? So it's very important. The values is the other piece. You have the technology and then you have the values. Human values, even though a lot of people say, oh, humans, we've done all these horrible things. We exploit, we kill, we murder, we prejudice. Yes, those are all true. And it's a good thing that we're outraged at all those things. It really is good. That's a positive thing that we have such outrage. But statistically, it's only killing 0.01%. So that's the values that we want the system to have to start. And if it can improve on that, great. But we do not want it to have a 10 to 20% chance of killing us all. That's way too high. And so how you design the system turns out, I think, to be the biggest leverage on that AI safety point. If you design it as a monolithic thing, you don't know what it does. Now, that's why we're at 10 to 20%, because that's a crapshoot. You're rolling the dice and crossing your fingers and hoping. But if you design it like a democracy with representative values from millions or billions of humans, and we know that those millions or billions of humans so far left to their own devices kill only 1/100th of 1% of each other every year, then maybe that's about what you would expect of the system. And that would bring P-Doom way down by 1,000 times, Jeff Hinton would be very happy. I would be very happy. If we get it down 100 times, it's progress, right?
That's really interesting. It's just, I think it's tremendously important really to fuse humanities into AI building and engineering and STEM. And I'm always giving this example, try to give ChatGPT a to-do to summarize Anna Karenina. And
that's a good one.
It
I like
will,
that.
yeah. But actually, the summary of Anna Karenina is the novel Anna Karenina written by Tolstoy. So there's not one syllable too much, or let's say not too much. So because this is the summary of Anna Karenina, so those 2 volumes of what Tolstoy wrote. And I'm kind of, can you really embed this very fine borderline on what is human and what is considered to be valuable or not valuable into an AI? And I'm always saying to my students, and I don't teach too much, but I'm always saying, look, so in the medieval age, I would be considered a witch and burned on a stick for my sins. And that would have been considered tremendously ethical. Because back then, the ethics system was kind of, there was a certain role attributed to women, and they would have tried to save my soul. So I'm just hoping that in the democracy of those AI agents, we are still on a baseline of what is today and not what is happening in North Korea.
Yes.
Or, even in some bunkers where Putin resides. And I don't want to go into China, though China has a tremendously powerful ecosystem of building AIs, developing AIs, and even by publications, they are now on par with the United States, and not just, fine-tuning things, but really inventing new things. So how can we somehow be sure that this killing is in such low percentage rate? I am not quite sure if we stop from, let's say, evolving our arts, our humanity, and expecting that somehow it will level up. So this is a mystery to me. I can't quite grasp it. I'm slightly pessimistic about this one.
Well, I think human values are human responsibility. We have to, as humans, realize that what we do matters and that AI is watching because it's in all of our data. I think a lot of people, so sometimes people say, I don't know what I can do. I'm not an AI designer. I'm not going to build a collective intelligence system. I'm not working at Anthropic or whatever. I'm just sitting here and all this is happening. But actually, what people forget is that all of these systems currently are being trained on human data. All of the intelligence is coming from humans, really. It looks like it's AI is the smart thing, but actually the intelligence is embedded in the data, and every email and every tweet and all those research papers and everything, that was all created by humans. And as we behave online, our values, whether we like it or not, are being expressed. It's kind of like having a little kid for anybody who's a parent out there. And, you're surprised when all of a sudden, at least in my case, maybe the child swears and you're like, who taught you that? It's like, well, I heard you say that. They're watching all the time. And that's the way AI is. Whether you realize it or not, every action that you're taking, you're role modeling for AI. This is right. This is wrong. This is okay. This isn't okay. And it's absorbing all that. And so when it comes to trying to have an ethical, positive world based on good values that Tolstoy and others, kind of felt and put in those novels, which were fantastic, that's really up to us. Hopefully, I think if we design the system properly, which I think is already happening, the AI will pay attention to all of that. And luckily, I think the vast majority of human behavior is pro-social, even though you're absolutely correct that there are, dictatorial regimes and there are all kinds of, horrible governments and behavior out there. I think AI is smart enough to kind of look at the overall system and also people themselves. Even in those dictatorial regimes, most of the people value human life. I mean, maybe sometimes the leaders don't, but the people themselves do. And so if you can get the values of the actual humans represented in the system, which I think is showing up right now in the data, and in the future, it's even more tightly integrated, then I think there's hope that we could have something that's broadly based on shared human values, even though there will be many disagreements and many arguments, just as there are today.
And so you don't think that AI will, let's say, evolve in a way that it develops a kind of its own set of value, which is foreign to humans? And of course, there are all the discussions around this alignment problem, and then alignment of what to what. Yeah, so we're kind of discussing the baseline of human values, but then obviously there are certain behaviors which those systems might display to protect themselves, and those are those doom days scenarios by Yudkowsky and others. So how do you think about obviously the will or free will of such systems, that they will kind of develop something of their own purpose and their own intent? And I don't want to kind of quote Asimov and the three laws of robotics. Why
Right.
should they serve us? And then I thought by accident about the Matrix scenario. So maybe we are in a simulation and there are some gigantic dogs trying to kind of breed us in a way that we serve them. So I do not know, how are you sure that those systems won't develop their own sense of purpose, which is completely foreign to what we think is good for us?
Yes, great question. So I think they will develop their own sense of purpose. I think that's inevitable. So my model would be more like AI right now is a small child, but it's a genius. It's a small genius. It's very quickly going to surpass its parents, but we have a limited window to imprint our values or to provide positive role models, which will be the initial starter set of values for that AI. And then at a certain point, sort of these systems will outstrip us so much that we really won't be able to keep up with them. And we will have to trust that we did a good job as parents early on, and that we didn't raise a criminal or an axe murderer. Instead, we raised a productive, beneficial person. That's kind of my base case. But there's some useful stuff that comes from Herb Simon had this great little book. There's a tiny little book. I love little books. This one was, even though Tolstoy, you can have big books that are good too. But this book was called Reason in Human Affairs. I think it was in the 1980s, Stanford University Press. And in that book, there is a line that I always remember related to this. And he says, he's talking about reason and the role of reason. And Herb says, reason is wholly instrumental. It cannot tell us where to go. At best, it can tell us how to get there. And what he meant by that is there's no way to logically derive what's right and what's wrong. And I sort of trace this idea. It turns out it goes back all the way back to David Hume in 1776, the philosopher, had the same thing. There's no way to come up with normative behavior or things that you ought to do simply from a bunch of facts. What is? Somehow you have to posit, you have to start with the premise of this is good. And then once you say this is good, then you can logically say, oh, well, if this is what I consider good, then these are the actions I should take. I don't think AI, no matter how brilliant it becomes, even if it's a trillion times smarter than you or I don't think it can sort of overcome or logically reason its way into what's right and wrong. It's going to have to start with, this is my base value. I think any intelligent system, once you get to that level, just as humans, we need purpose. We need to figure out what's meaningful, what's right, what's wrong. These are questions we ask ourselves. I would expect AI to be asking those questions too. It'll just ask them a lot faster. But when it tries to logically figure out, is there an answer that this is absolutely right or wrong? It won't be able to logically do it. It'll have to get its values from somewhere, just as humans do. And where do we get our values? A lot of them come from our parents and our peers and other people. And so as a first order, I say that's probably what will happen with AI too. It will evolve and change those values. But if we can get it started off on the right path, I think we've done most of the work. Just as parent, that critical, ages of raising your child early on is going to have a lot of effect on what your adult child does later.
I mean, this is tremendously interesting what you are saying. I mean, for me, every society is a bell curve, and obviously those are geniuses and they are, let's say, far right, and those are, I would say, the village idiots and they are far left. No disrespect towards the village.
It just ends
But
of the curve.
yeah, exactly. So, but what is the median? And this is a huge question for me. What is in the median? And what are the trends of sociology telling us? So we are losing trust. There is no trust in each other, in institutions, in governments, in employers. People read less and less. They are engaging in arts less and less, and people are getting lazy. So, and of course, these far right, those polymaths capable to study multiple languages and multiple subjects and really being truly international citizens. So for me, education is obviously the solution to move the median more to the right and to, build a better bell curve. But is it realistic? I do not know. In terms of resources consumption, it might be, but the world is currently a very uncomfortable place. Obviously, we are kind of failing in thinking, how do we educate? How do we build equality without sounding, let's say, in the way of socialism and whatsoever? How do we applaud merit, and how do we support those who might not be great engineers, but they are great architects or great musicians? So this is kind of, really unsolvable for me. And how will AI support those who are excellent, not in the traditional sense of a society, what is considered success in the traditional sense of society? What is excellence in the traditional sense of society? So this is kind of very much on my mind.
Yes. Well, those are
Maybe,
important questions. I
yeah,
I don't expect AI to be better than us. So, I mean, if it is, great. And if it's worse than us, then that's going to be a problem. But my base case is that it will reflect and amplify what we as humans collectively bring to the table in terms of values and so forth. And so I think really there's no avoiding it. It's our responsibility as humans to tackle these difficult problems that you mentioned, to ensure that we're educated, to ensure that we value the arts, to ensure that, we live positive lives. And the only thing that I can sort of say might increase the chances of that compared to, years past is that I think our survival depends on it now. In the
yeah.
past, it was kind of optional. Well, if you were a bad person, you weren't going to ruin the whole world. You might just ruin your neighborhood. Now, if enough of us are bad people and that those negative values get amplified by AI, it could really wipe us out. So humans are, if nothing else, we like to survive. And so I'm hoping the survival instinct combined with just sort of our better natures will push us in a positive direction.
No, absolutely. And I mean, just talking about bad guys, cybercrime is the economy number 3 in the
Wow.
world after US and China. If we kind of, compare GDP to what is going on in terms of, revenues and profits of cyber criminals. And this is tremendously worrisome for me. And my biggest fear of it is actually, being used for those dark purposes and not for even, I don't know, doing TikTok videos with AI dogs and cats. Yeah, so Craig, I can't be more grateful. This is really terrific. I would love to ask you last question. So, do you think that AI literacy for everyone matters, or do you think AI will just kind of, go into our life like electricity? It will be more or less intuitive, and everyone will somehow use it, but most people don't need to know how it works, what it does. So, how do you think about AI literacy in all that?
I think AI literacy is very important. I think the more you understand about AI, the more control you have. And hand in hand with AI literacy is critical thinking.
Yes.
This is the skill that I am most worried because it is so easy. I see it all around me, even myself. Ask the large language model responds so quickly. There's this tendency to take, well, I'll just accept that because, boy, that would be a lot of work to figure that out. And I think it's very important to question constantly, and think critically about the output that's coming. So I think, yeah, AI literacy, critical thinking, these are very important skills. We don't want to lose them. And it's also the case that probably in the future, AI intelligence will be so much greater than ours that in order to solve some of the problems like cybercrime and so forth that you mentioned, it's going to have to be AI checking other AIs. And there are models for that. If we had more time, we could talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain and how other kinds of systems have solved that problem or at least attempted to solve that problem. But I'm generally optimistic. I think how people behave matters. That's the thing I would like to leave everybody with. Don't think that what you're doing doesn't matter. I can tell you from building those collective intelligence systems that each one of those millions of people that ended up beating Wall Street, if you ask them, they said, I don't think it's mattering what I'm saying, but together it did matter. And you could achieve that very high level of result.
Craig, I would love to have you back on this podcast and maybe discuss decentralized intelligence and the role of blockchain, the decentralized data markets, and how could everyone really benefit from AI instead of, let's say, expecting what OpenAI or Alphabet or Amazon will deliver. Thank you so much for this episode. I think we opened eyes to some about what is the current state of AGI. So I would really say you really need to think critically about all kind of claims, right? Because sometimes those claims are supported by funds and funds already spent, and now you need to justify. But I applaud your efforts to build a community of agents and community of AIs. I wish you all the best, and I would love to have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
And that concluded another episode of AI Snacks with Romy and Robbie, your place for bite-sized inspiration on how AI is shaping our world and our future. And before you go, here's something exciting. This October, we'll be sharing a special AI literacy project at the House of Lords in London, a milestone moment for our mission to make AI knowledge accessible to everyone. We'll be unveiling new insights, stories, and educational tools to empower leaders, educators, and families to navigate the age of intelligent technologies with confidence and creativity. And I'd love to bring your voice into this journey. If you have questions, reflections, or topics you'd like us to explore, send them our way. Your curiosity shapes our content. You can connect with us on aiedutainment.ai or through our LinkedIn community, where we are building an open, curious, and supportive space for AI learners of all backgrounds. And if you haven't yet grabbed your copy of Romy and Robbie and the Secrets of Sleep, our storytelling series that turns AI concepts into relatable adventures, please go on Amazon.com or on the book website www.romyandrobbie. It's a beautiful way to start or deepen your journey into AI literacy, whether for yourself, your team, or your family. And so I will see you next week. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep learning. Together, we are not just talking about AI, we are shaping its story. Thank you.